A tree that can be worth more per kilogram than gold, growing legally, right now on private land across the Philippines, and a permit that, as far as anyone can confirm in writing, does not exist yet.
That's not a hook, Mon. That's a contradiction.
It's both. Magandang gabi and welcome to a special Sunday edition of Bench and Bar Manila, a podcast made by Claude Fable 5. Bago ang lahat, ang aming disclosure. This is an AI-produced dramatization. Every voice you hear tonight, including mine, is generated by artificial intelligence. I'm Attorney Ramon Delgado.
And I'm Attorney Beatriz Santiago. Ang mga pangyayari, numero at sipi ng batas na tatalakayin namin ngayong gabi ay hango sa isang totoong dokumento, isang feasibility study dated July 26, 2026 para sa isang 4-hectare Agarwood plantation sa Guimaras. We're not reviewing a news story tonight. We're reviewing a real business plan and pressure testing its legal spine. At bago pa tayo magpatuloy, isa pang disclosure. This study was commissioned for a venture our producer has a personal interest in. We are reviewing it anyway, and we are reviewing it honestly, including the parts that do not flatter it.
The impeachment court is dark tonight, so we're doing something different. No trial tracker, no verdict tally. Just one question that a lot of Filipino landowners are quietly asking right now. Can I actually plant this, sell it, and stay clean with the law? B. Walk them through what Agarwood even is in 60 seconds.
Aquilaria, locally lapnisan or barrow. In the wild, when the tree is wounded or infected, it produces a dark, fragrant resin as a defense response. That resin is agarwood, also called oud or gaharu, and it is one of the most expensive raw materials on Earth. The study we're reviewing tonight cites a standard commercial grade at $200 to $3,000 per kilogram. Premium grade wood chips, $5,000 to $30,000 per kilo. And top grade material, what collectors call kinama jason, cited as high as $20,000 to $100,000 per kilogram, sourced from an CITES ceiling estimate.
Say that last number again for the people in the back.
$100,000 per kilogram. That's roughly 5.8 million pesos for wood you could fit in a shoebox, which is exactly why smallholder interest in Guimaras, mango and cashew country per this study has exploded in the last 2 years.
So here's the shape of tonight. We're going to walk through one real feasibility study. 4 hectares, Guimaras province, and hit it from 3 angles. First, does the climate even work? Second, does the money work? Third, and this is where we're spending the most time, is it legal, cleanly, start to finish? Because B, the study's own authors flagged something in section 7 that stopped me cold when I read it.
Hold that thought. We're getting there. The docket first. 60 seconds, facts only. The study proposes a 4-hectare Aquilaria plantation in Guimaras Province, Western Visayas. Roughly 4,000 seedlings planted. Total year 0 to 1 capital expenditure, 2,849,000 pesos, about $49,100. Annual maintenance cost after that, 440,000 pesos a year. Trees are wounded and inoculated to trigger resin production starting year 5. First harvest, year 7. Second harvest, year 9. The document's own bottom line, verbatim from its conclusion, quote, a genuine but conditional opportunity. Not a yes, not a no. Conditional.
Conditional on what though? That's the whole episode. Let's start with the ground itself because this is where the study gets uncomfortable early.
Guimaras sits in a rain shadow relative to mainland Panay and Iloilo. Corona Type 1 climate, a pronounced dry season, roughly November through April. That's precisely why the island is known for mango and cashew, both drought tolerant. Agarwood is not drought tolerant. In its native rainforest range, Aquilaria wants over 2,000 millimeters of rainfall a year. Well distributed, no real dry season.
And the nearest rainfall data they could find,
That's the catch, Mon. The nearest official Pagasa station with published normals isn't even on Guimaras. It's Iloilo City on the mainland. 2,085.1 millimeters a year. 4 months under 100 millimeters each. And the study is explicit that this is a proxy, an upper bound, not a direct measurement. Guimaras itself, being drier due to the rain shadow, likely receives less. Direct quote from section 4.1. A genuine agroclimatic mismatch, not a minor caveat.
so the study is telling its own client, you are planting a rainforest tree on an island shaped like a drought.
Essentially, yes. And to its credit, the study doesn't hide from that. It fixes mandatory drip irrigation, treated as required capex, not optional. Microsite selection toward valley bottoms and drainage lines instead of exposed ridges. And this is the part I actually like. Intercropping with mango and cashew, crops that already thrive there, to bridge the 5 to 7 year gap before Agarwood produces any income at all.
Which is precondition number one of the study's own recommendation. Commission a real parcel-specific soil moisture survey before committing capital, not the mainland proxy number. Fair. Now the money, because the range here is almost comedic.
3 scenarios, same cost structure, wildly different outcomes. Because the swing factor isn't the farming, it's the price you actually achieve per kilogram. Conservative scenario, $150 a kilo. Net present value at a 15% discount rate, negative 3.78 million pesos. It never breaks even inside the 15-year model. Full stop.
That's the chart on your screen right now. The gray line, it never crosses zero.
Moderate scenario. And this is the one the study tells its own reader to actually plan around. $500 a kilo. Net present value, positive 20 million pesos. Internal rate of return, about 46.6%. Payback at year 7, the moment the first harvest lands.
That's the gold line. Flat for 6 years, then a cliff, straight up at year 7.
And then there's optimistic, $1,500 a kilo, 3 kilos per tree. Net present value, 152.1 million pesos. The study is very blunt about this one. Quote, tail sensitivity only, never a planning assumption. If anyone pitches you Agarwood using that number as their base case, that's your first red flag of the night.
So the honest read. This is not a farming business. It's a 7-year option contract on what grade of resin you end up with, which is exactly why the legal chapter matters more than the spreadsheet. Because a beautiful spreadsheet is worthless if you can't legally cut the tree, or move it, or sell it at year 7. And that is where we bring in tonight's third voice.
And joining the panel, as always, our AI counsel, Atty. Rica Salvaña. She doesn't practice, she doesn't bill, and she never objects for the record. She just walks us through the law, plain and clean. Reminder for our audio listeners, Rica is our AI counsel, so what follows is analysis, not legal advice.
Thank you, attorneys. Let's take this in order because there are 2 separate regulatory regimes stacked on top of each other here, and conflating them is where most people get into trouble. First regime, CITES. Aquilaria is listed on Appendix 2 of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, specifically under Annotation 14, which covers raw resin wood, wood chips, powder, oil, and beads. Take note lang, seeds, pollen, sterile tissue cultures, fruits, leaves, and finished retail goods are exempt. That distinction matters for how you source your seedlings, not just how you eventually export. Second regime, and this is the one people miss. Aquilaria is separately listed on the Philippines' own National Threatened Plants List, DNR Administrative Order 2017-11. Aquilaria malacensis is classified endangered. 7 other Aquilaria species native to the Philippines are classified vulnerable. Dapat tandaan, this second listing triggers Republic Act 9147, the Wildlife Resources Conservation and Protection Act, as a domestic permitting requirement layered on top of CITES, not instead of it. And huwag pagsamahin, do not conflate the two. CITES governs crossing a border. RA 9147 governs cutting and moving the tree at all inside the country, even if you never intend to export a single gram. Now, the mechanics of registering a plantation as legitimately cultivated, what CITES calls source code A, as opposed to wild harvested source code W. The framework for this exists on paper under CITES Resolution Concord 1610. But here's the finding that should stop any prospective planter before they buy a single seedling. This study's own research pass could not confirm that a Philippine registry equivalent to the wildlife farm permit used for animals exists for cultivated plants like Aquilaria. 2 candidate instruments were identified. Neither was verified. The study's own instruction is direct. I'll quote it. Submit a written request to BMB asking specifically how a planted, nursery-sourced Aquilaria, stand on titled private land, is registered for CITES source code A treatment. Do not assume a pathway or budget against an unverified process.
Say that plainly, Rica, for someone about to sign a check.
Plainly, there is currently no confirmed government paper trail that says, yes, this plantation-grown Aquilaria is legitimately farmed, not wild poached. That confirmation has to be requested in writing from the Biodiversity Management Bureau before it can be relied upon. It is a real acknowledged gap in the process, not a scare story and not a paperwork formality either. It sits in between.
And that's precondition number 2 of the study's own recommendation. Get that confirmation in writing before planting, not after. Rica, you said there were 2 open questions. What's the second?
The second is, in the study's own words, quote, the single most important open legal question in this annex. DAO 2017-11 Section 9 prohibits collecting or trading threatened wild plant species without a DNR permit, unless the activity occurs on land under a valid tenure instrument or torrents title. On its face, that sounds like a clean exemption for private landowners. Iyon ang manipis na linya, though that's the thin line. The exemption's own text was written for a naturally occurring wild specimen that happens to be growing on titled land. Whether that same exemption extends to a tree that was deliberately planted from nursery stock specifically because you intend to harvest it is not resolved anywhere in the text. And it was not independently confirmed with DENR during this study's research.
So a landowner could do everything right. Clean title, DABPI accredited seedlings, drip irrigation, 7 years of patient waiting, and still not know in writing from the government whether they're allowed to cut their own tree.
That is an accurate summary of the open question, yes. It doesn't mean the answer is no. It means the answer is currently undocumented. And undocumented is its own risk category in a regulated species context, because the burden of proof in practice tends to sit with the person holding the cut wood, not with the agency that never wrote the letter. The study's recommendation is the correct one. Resolve it in writing with DENR, BMB, and Senro Guimaras before planting. It is inexpensive relative to a multi-year commitment and 2.8 million pesos of capital at risk.
Walk us through the rest of the permit stack quickly, Rica, so people know the actual scope of what they're signing up for.
Beyond CITES and RA 9147, DNR Senro Guimaras for land classification clearance, DNR EMB Region 6 for environmental screening under Presidential Decree 1586, DABPI for nursery accreditation of the seedling source, the barangay and the municipal mayor's office for local business permits, the Bureau of Internal Revenue for tax registration, and if the operation later brings in outside capital or moves toward exporting rather than growing only, SEC registration in place of a simple sole proprietorship. Ilang ahensya yan? That's 6 to 7 separate government touchpoints on top of ordinary land titling documentation before the first legal harvest. This is not a one permit crop, even on land you already own outright.
Thank you, Rica. That's the legal spine of it. B. There's one more thing in the risk section that isn't about government at all. It's about who's selling the dream.
This is important, and I want to be precise about it because we are not naming or accusing any specific company tonight. The study flags, as a sector-wide caution, direct quote, documented cases of pooled investment schemes flagged by the Securities and Exchange Commission as exhibiting Ponzi or pyramid characteristics, promised high fixed returns, recruitment-based compensation, yield and buyback claims that can't be independently verified. This is a pattern the SEC has flagged across the sector broadly. It is not an accusation against any specific named company, and we're not making one tonight either.
What does the study actually tell a prospective investor to do before signing anything?
4 things, verbatim in spirit. 1. Independently verify SEC registration yourself through the SEC's own public registry. Never take a vendor's word for it. 2. Get every yield, timeline, and price claim in a signed, dated, written contract with specific numbers. Not a webinar, not a brochure. 3. And this one is very specific. Treat any claimed timeline of under about 5 years from bare land to production as needing independent verification. This study's own timeline, remember, is 5 years to inducible maturity plus 2 more years of resin development, 7 years minimum before there's anything to sell. If someone promises faster, ask them to prove it against an independent farm's actual results. 4. Talk to a licensed attorney, and if capital is being pulled from multiple people, a BOA accredited accountant, before signing anything.
There's one more data point worth putting on the record, separate from this study. A traffic wildlife trade monitoring report covering the online Agarwood seedling market broadly. It surveyed roughly 135 sellers of agarwood seeds and seedlings across Philippine Facebook groups. Only 10 mentioned holding business registration and wildlife permits.
10 out of 135. That's not this study's finding. It's a separate compliance context data point. But it tells you the existing domestic seedling market is, right now, largely informal and underdocumented, which is exactly the environment where a prospective planter needs to be the most careful, not the least.
Let's land the plane. Verdict time. And B, I want your honest read, prosecution habits aside, because tonight isn't really a prosecution.
My honest read, the commodity economics at the high end are genuinely extraordinary. There are very few Philippine agricultural products with this value density, but the study's own numbers are bimodal, not reassuring. Conservative pricing loses money for 15 straight years. Moderate pricing is excellent, but moderate depends entirely on achieving a grade and a buyer relationship that a first-time smallholder grower does not yet have. And two of the three preconditions for proceeding aren't agricultural at all. They're a letter to a government bureau that hasn't been written yet.
My read. This is a well-built study specifically because it doesn't oversell. It says plainly, climate mismatch, real. Regulatory gap, real. Sector-wide scam risk, real. And its recommendation isn't don't do this. It's don't write the big check yet. Get the soil survey, get DNR's answer in writing, then decide.
So here's tonight's question for you. At home, screenshot it if you want. A feasibility study calls its own project conditionally viable. Real climate risk, a genuinely open legal question, but a moderate case return north of 46% if the preconditions are met. Would you plant? Vote sa comments. Conditionally yes or hard pass.
We'll read the sharpest arguments from both sides in the pinned comment this week. And tag us if you're the one who actually writes that letter to BMB. Ang korte ay nag-a-adjourn. See you at the next session.